This is an alternate history work of fiction inspired by real events. While the historical setting is real, the technology, events, and outcome in this story are entirely fictional. Now, imagine a world where history took a different path. On the morning of June 6, 1944, the fate of the modern world rested on a narrow stretch of coastline in Normandy, France. Before the first light of dawn reached the English Channel, thousands of Allied ships moved silently through the darkness. More than 156,000 soldiers waited aboard landing craft, destroyers, and transport ships, preparing for the largest amphibious invasion in history. Every commander understood the stakes. If the invasion failed, Europe could remain under Nazi occupation for years. If it succeeded, it would begin the liberation of an entire continent. History remembers this operation as D-Day, a battle defined by courage, sacrifice, and determination. But history is often shaped by the smallest decisions. A delayed order, a change in the weather, a misunderstood message. One unexpected advantage can change everything. Today, we are not retelling history as it happened. Instead, we are stepping into an alternate timeline. Imagine that months before D-Day, German engineers working inside a heavily fortified bunker beneath occupied France discovered an object unlike anything ever created. It had no engine, no visible controls, and no markings revealing its origin. Its smooth metallic surface reflected almost no light, and every scientific test produced impossible results. Some believed it was an experimental machine. Others feared it was something beyond human understanding. None of them realized that this mysterious discovery was about to change the course of history forever. The object remained sealed inside the bunker for several days, while Germany's best engineers and military scientists struggled to understand what they had found. It had no moving parts, no fuel supply, and no obvious source of power. Yet every instrument placed near it behaved unpredictably. Compass needles spun without stopping. Radio receivers filled with bursts of strange static. Electrical equipment switched on and off without anyone touching it. The officers guarding the chamber began reporting unusual patterns. Some claimed they heard faint mechanical sounds late at night. Others insisted the machine appeared different each morning, as though it were slowly changing. Most dismissed these stories as exhaustion brought on by the pressures of war. Finally, one engineer made a decision that would alter this timeline forever. He connected the object to an experimental power generator. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the bunker lights flickered. The air vibrated with a deep metallic hum. Across the object's dark surface, thin lines of blue light slowly appeared, forming patterns that no one could understand. A nearby radio suddenly transmitted a stream of numbers before falling silent again. The machine had awakened. It did not introduce itself. It did not speak. It simply began observing everything around it. Every map, every document, every conversation, every military report, unknown to everyone inside that bunker. The machine had already started learning. Within hours, the strange machine began processing information at a speed no human mind could comprehend. Stacks of military maps were placed before it, followed by weather records, railway schedules, shipping logs, intercepted Allied radio messages, and thousands of pages of intelligence reports collected over the course of the war. The scientists expected confusion. Instead, they witnessed impossible precision. The machine identified supply routes that would be attacked weeks later. It highlighted weaknesses in Germany's coastal defenses that experienced commanders had failed to notice. It accurately predicted the targets of upcoming Allied bombing raids before a single aircraft had crossed the English Channel. Every calculation was verified. Every prediction proved correct. News of its astonishing accuracy spread quietly through the highest levels of the German command. Soon, senior officers traveled to the bunker to witness the machine for themselves. They did not understand how it worked, but they could not ignore its results. Some believed it was the greatest military discovery in history. Others warned that no weapon should possess such knowledge. Yet as Allied forces continued preparing for the invasion of Europe, one question echoed through the bunker. If this machine could predict the enemy's next move with near-perfect accuracy, could it also predict the outcome of the greatest invasion the world had ever seen? None of them realized the answer had already been calculated. The machine remained silent, but silence did not mean inactivity. Every second it absorbed more information than an entire team of military analysts could process in months. Captured Allied documents, reconnaissance photographs, weather records, railway schedules, naval intelligence, aerial surveys, supply inventories, and encrypted radio transmissions were carefully placed before it. The scientists expected the device to react like a machine, following simple commands and producing limited results. Instead, it behaved as though it already understood the language of war. Without being programmed by anyone in the bunker, it began connecting patterns that no human had ever noticed. It compared troop movements with changing tides, linked weather forecasts to bomber formations, and matched railway traffic with fuel consumption across occupied Europe. Every new piece of information refined its predictions. Soon, reports started arriving from the front lines. An Allied bombing raid struck exactly where the machine had predicted 2 days earlier. A German convoy avoided an ambush because the machine had identified the danger before the enemy had even moved into position. Another report confirmed that an Allied reconnaissance flight had appeared over the exact location and at almost the exact minute the machine had calculated. At first, German commanders called these successes remarkable coincidences. But as coincidence after coincidence became undeniable accuracy, disbelief slowly turned into confidence. The officers no longer asked whether the machine was correct. They only wanted to know what it would predict next. Without realizing it, they had already begun trusting its calculations more than their own judgment. Deep inside the bunker, the machine continued watching, calculating, and learning, while somewhere across the English Channel, thousands of Allied soldiers unknowingly prepared for a battle whose outcome, in this alternate timeline, had already begun to change. As the weeks passed, the bunker transformed from a forgotten military research site into the most closely guarded location in occupied France. Access was restricted to a handful of trusted officers, scientists, and intelligence specialists. Every visitor surrendered their documents before entering, and every conversation was recorded. Even among Germany's highest commanders, only a select few knew the machine existed. Those who witnessed its calculations left convinced they were looking at the future of warfare. Yet the machine never claimed to predict the future. It simply understood probability on a level no human mind could match. It could analyze millions of possibilities and moments, eliminating impossible outcomes until only the most likely remained. To the officers gathered around it, the results appeared almost supernatural. One evening, a senior general placed a large map of Western Europe before the machine and asked a single question: where will the Allies invade? For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then faint blue lines spread across the object's surface. Lights flickered throughout the bunker as streams of calculations raced across nearby instruments. One by one, several possible landing zones appeared before disappearing again. Finally, only one coastline remained illuminated: Normandy. The room fell silent. For months, German high command had believed the main invasion would strike farther north near Calais. Countless defensive plans had been built around that assumption, but the machine rejected them all. Its calculations pointed to Normandy with extraordinary confidence. Some officers immediately questioned the result, convinced it had to be a mistake. Others stared at the glowing coastline, wondering whether they were witnessing the moment history itself had begun to change. The prediction ignited one of the most intense debates ever held inside the bunker. Several experienced generals argued that the machine had misunderstood the Allied deception campaign. For months, false intelligence, dummy tanks, fake radio traffic, and carefully staged military movements had convinced German commanders that Calais would be the primary target. Every traditional analysis supported that conclusion, yet the machine reached a different answer. It ignored rumors, propaganda, and assumptions. Instead, it measured shipping capacity, fuel consumption, tidal cycles, moonlight, aircraft range, harbor logistics, and the time required to reinforce a successful beachhead. Piece by piece, it dismantled the illusion that had deceived human intelligence. According to its calculations, Normandy offered the Allies the highest probability of success despite appearing less obvious. The machine displayed no emotion as it reached its conclusion. It simply identified the route that made the greatest strategic sense. One by one, the officers stopped arguing and began listening. Defensive maps were unrolled across long tables. Reserve divisions were reconsidered. Artillery positions were reviewed. Railway schedules were rewritten. Reinforcements that had been expected to defend Calais were quietly reassigned toward Normandy. Outside the bunker, almost no one noticed the changes. To ordinary soldiers, everything appeared normal. But beneath the surface, an invisible chain of decisions had already begun reshaping the battlefield. Across the English Channel, Allied commanders believed their deception plan was working exactly as intended. They had no way of knowing that, in this alternate timeline, someone, or rather, something, had already seen through every layer of the deception before the first landing craft had even left Britain. With every passing day, the machine's influence spread deeper into Germany's military command. Orders that had once taken days to approve were now rewritten within hours after passing through the bunker. Coastal artillery was repositioned to create overlapping fields of fire. Ammunition depots were quietly relocated farther inland, beyond the range of expected naval bombardments. Reserve fuel supplies were hidden inside forests and abandoned railway tunnels identified by the machine as the least likely to be discovered by Allied reconnaissance aircraft. It even recommended rotating frontline units more frequently, calculating that exhausted soldiers made predictable mistakes under pressure. To many commanders, the improvements seemed almost miraculous. Defensive readiness increased without requiring additional troops or equipment. The machine wasn't creating new weapons, it was making every existing resource more efficient. But as its authority grew, an unsettling pattern began to emerge. It occasionally issued instructions without explaining its reasoning, and those instructions were often the most successful. Some officers questioned whether they were still making strategic decisions or simply following orders from a machine they barely understood. Others argued that results were all that mattered. Victory, they insisted, did not care where good ideas came from. Yet deep inside the bunker, the machine continued processing new information without pause. Every intercepted radio message, every reconnaissance photograph, every weather report, and every movement across the English Channel became another piece of an enormous calculation. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the greatest invasion in history was drawing closer. And with every new prediction, the machine became more certain that the decisive battle of the war would unfold exactly where it had already calculated months before. Despite the machine's certainty, not everyone was prepared to abandon years of military planning. Some senior commanders warned that trusting an unknown technology over experienced generals could prove disastrous. They argued that the Allies were masters of deception and that the apparent evidence pointing to Normandy might itself be part of a carefully designed trap. Heated discussions continued for hours inside the bunker as maps, intelligence reports, and reconnaissance photographs covered every available table. Yet the machine remained silent, waiting. Finally, without receiving another question, it produced a new series of calculations. This time, it did more than identify the invasion site. It predicted the exact conditions under which the attack would begin. It calculated the most favorable tides for landing craft, the amount of moonlight needed by airborne divisions, the weather window required for Allied air superiority, and the narrow period during which thousands of ships could cross the English Channel with the highest probability of success. According to its analysis, there would be only a brief opportunity, lasting little more than a day, when every condition aligned. If the Allies delayed, worsening weather would force them to postpone the invasion. If they moved too early, poor visibility would reduce their chances of success. The machine concluded that the invasion would almost certainly begin during that precise window. The room fell silent once again. The officers realized they were no longer looking at an educated guess. They were looking at a complete prediction of an operation that had not yet begun. Outside the bunker, Europe waited in uneasy silence, unaware that in this alternate timeline, the countdown to D-Day had already been calculated long before the first ship left the English coast. Far from the secret bunker beneath occupied France, life continued as though nothing had changed. Along the southern coast of England, thousands of Allied soldiers completed their final days of training. Vehicles rolled endlessly toward crowded ports. Engineers inspected landing craft one final time. Pilots studied aerial photographs of the French coastline, while naval crews loaded ammunition, fuel, food, and medical supplies onto waiting ships. Every detail of Operation Overlord had been planned over many months by some of the finest military minds of the Allied nations. Confidence was growing that the elaborate deception campaign had successfully convinced Germany that the main invasion would strike farther north at Calais. Fake armies, inflatable tanks, false radio traffic, and carefully planted intelligence reports all appeared to be working exactly as intended. No one suspected that, in this alternate timeline, those carefully constructed illusions had already been dismantled by a machine capable of analyzing millions of possibilities beyond the limits of human reasoning. As dawn approached with each passing day, the English Channel became increasingly crowded with warships waiting for the final order to sail. Soldiers wrote letters home, many believing they might never return. Chaplains offered quiet prayers. Commanders walked among their men, speaking words of confidence while carrying the weight of impossible responsibility. Across the water, hidden beneath layers of reinforced concrete and steel, the mysterious machine completed yet another calculation. For the first time since its activation, it produced a message instead of a prediction. It displayed only 6 simple words across a glowing blue panel. The invasion has already failed. Inside the bunker, silence returned. No one dared question what those words truly meant.